Hello everybody, this is Luna calling. Luna, that is, locating unforgettable new accidents.
Okay. That was a very nice spontaneous one.
So calling out all lovers of the absolute, all those drunk on the universe.
Yeah.
We're diving right into it today.
Rolling about in infinity. We're going back through Spinoza's ethics because we pulled a bit of a fast one on you, dear listeners, by jumping you into the appendix.
Absolutely. That was the easy way in.
It was the easy way in because it's a bit of a complicated text, but now we're going to throw you back into the beginning and make you do the actual hard work of trying to understand what this book is, the ethics.
Yeah, and so just to try and structure things a little bit, the first thing we're going to do is talk about what it means to be suddenly thrown into the infinite. Like, how can a book actually begin by installing the reader in infinity? That's our first big question. And then our second question is, following from what we were saying about the appendix in episode 15, what does it mean to depersonalize God?
Yeah, and what does it mean to, rid ourselves of all of the prejudices that we have going into this very project? Because in the previous episode, we were talking about Spinoza's overall project, right? We've created this conception of God. God has a will. God is good. God does all of these things. God is the author. But Spinoza says these are simply our projections of our own prejudices onto the concept of God. And so for him to be able to clear away our prejudices, we're going to have to come up with a different conception of God, right?
Exactly. And that will be the third and final part of our episode today, will be simply what happens when you strip away all the prejudices. What's left? How do we think this maximum being? What tools do we have? And we'll just start to touch on that. And that will be the end of this episode.
So it's been a bit of a hiatus. So I'm working through the cobwebs here. I'm having to cast my mind back to what it is that Spinoza has been telling us, and then of course I've been having to go back and reread the ethics from the beginning.
You've had to come back to the old world. I mean, some of you listeners might not know, but Val's been off in the new world.
I have, yes.
And he bloody well came back and brought Trump back with him in his baggage.
That's not my fault. I mean, to be fair, I was in New York City, which was, of course, used to be called New Amsterdam, right?
Yeah, it's also Trump's city, New York City.
It's also Mamdani's city. And it was a very stark contrast for me, because the last time I was in the US was in 2015. This is pre-Trump. This is pre-everything. And I gotta say, last time I was there, I did not have a very good time. This time around, though, I feel like there's a genuine sense of hope, regardless of what you think about, the political future of democratic socialists. There was a tangible sense that I think, I don't know, some kind of hope that people had.
Well, it's pretty rare to have a mayor like Mamdani in power in a major city.
I mean, in the world in which we live, people have to cling on to just even the smallest concessions, right?
Right, so Val comes back, brings Trump in his baggage. Trump goes and occupies Versailles. Oh. My daughter was super pissed off. She finished the baccalaureate yesterday, and with all of her friends, they wanted to go out. All the public squares were closed. All the bus lines were shut down.
Of course. Was that just yesterday, or was that just recently?
There's been for about 4 days or so. You couldn't park anywhere in Versailles. He found himself in the Hall of Mirrors.
Yeah, I don't know how he snuck into my luggage. They're very strict about baggage requirements here. So what he was doing in my luggage, I'm not quite sure.
He was texting Melania. So let's turn to Luna. Have some more fun with Luna. The start of the ethics is super abstract and difficult, and people famously open the ethics and just say, "What's going on with these definitions?"
Yeah.
And so what Luna did is she actually just flipped through the pages of the book, and she landed on this amazing claim that is actually proposition 14 and 15 of part 1. Yeah. And if we actually turn to these, we find that Spinoza writes, and this gives us a clue to his entire project. Yeah. And this is corollary 1.
I struggle with that word. Yeah. Corollary.
Corollary.
Yeah. Something about the Australian accent stumbles on corollary.
We were not built to say these
cassowary, corollary.
Corollary 1 states, God is unique. That is, in the universe, there is only one substance, and it is absolutely infinite. And then he continues in Proposition 15 by saying, whatever is in God, and nothing can be or be conceived without God.
Yeah. So like just a very succinct, profound ontological claim, right? This is the universe. The universe is God. God is unique. God is one substance. And, so Spinoza from the outset is giving us a very different picture from what Descartes was giving us, right? If our listeners do recall, for Descartes, there's two substances, there's thought and, there's thought and extension. Right?
Yeah, there's two substances in us.
Yes.
Each of us joins together two substances.
Exactly.
A mind and a body.
Mind and the body.
Yeah.
Spinoza, there's just one unique substance, and that one unique substance is God. And what is God? God is absolutely infinite.
Yeah, and we're all inside God.
And we're all a part of God. It's very kind of hippy-dippy. I dare say it, like we're all one. We're all one in this universe, man. Like...
Man, it's a force.
Yeah,
it's
don't
everywhere.
you know that our consciousness is just the universe experiencing itself consciously?
Now, that is the bad pantheistic German
is.
Idealist reading of Spinoza. And we're not going to have any of that
absolutely
in this podcast. Luna's not up for that. She's not hippie, Luna. She's more like a punk, if she's anything. So basically what Spinoza does, so Luna suddenly falls into the book in these amazing propositions, Proposition 14, the corollary, and Proposition 15. Yeah. And basically what's happened is it's like a back door has been opened and she's fallen into the sublime.
Yeah, so because it's a very dizzying experience trying to think the absolutely infinite all at once. I don't want to keep harping on about Descartes, but at least he was gentle. He started us off with the most minimal substance. Spinoza does the opposite. He just starts us out in this maximally infinite absolute space, right? And it's
I like to think of this via a kind of an image. Like Descartes is like a teenager in his bedroom.
Yeah.
Right. And he tries to think everything from the position of an alienated teenager in the bedroom. Right. With your poster up of David Bowie on one side,
a Stratocaster in the corner that's been neglected or that you can strum out a couple of chords on.
Jesus and Mary chain poster on the other wall.
Alone in his room, you know.
That's Descartes. Whereas Spinoza, it's like the end of Stanley Kubrick's 2001.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
Or it's like that scene in Christopher Nolan's Interstellar.
Yes.
In which he's passing through the black hole.
Yeah.
Right? So you're thrown out into the universe in a way. Yeah. And many of our readers will say, how on earth can you, I know what it might mean to think the existence of a chair or an elephant or something. How do you think the infinite?
Yeah. Well, this is what is so disorienting about Spinoza's whole project. It's something that it immediately confronts the reader because you're presented with this totally disorienting, dizzying array of everything whatsoever. So it's how do you then find a point of orientation through this? How do you even relate your thought to what this infinite is?
And the crazy thing is that, generation after generation of students have found their way in Spinoza.
Absolutely.
They do find their way. And I think for me, there are two different aspects. On the one hand, he's depersonalizing this absolute. So it's not about our little subjectivity. It's about the infinite.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's a kind of joy in Spinoza because he's beginning with this affirmation. Yeah. He's beginning with this outpouring of being.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of, one of my masters when I was doing my undergraduate degree was Jacques Derrida. One of his most difficult and most beautiful books is called Of Spirit, and that's where he tries to come to terms with Heidegger, which is not easy, the Black Forest dwelling Nazi philosopher.
Yes.
And one of the things that Derrida says is that Heidegger harps on and on and on about the question being primary in philosophy.
Yes,
And what Derrida argues is actually before you can ask any question, before you can engage in any critique, before you can be a skeptic, right? There has to be some kind of presupposition, some kind of primordial affirmation.
Yes, exactly. The famous what comes before the question.
Exactly.
What are the conditions under which the question can even be posed?
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. So what does he do, Val, in part one? Like, what is, like, there are 5 parts to the ethics. We know that.
Yeah.
What is the project of part one?
Well, I mean, he's going to be laying out exactly what this substance is, or what his conception of God is, right? And so he's going to be giving us the various ways in which he understands, the I suppose everything, the way he understands existence itself. So it's and its essence, right? So he's going to be basically just cashing out his ontological framework, the question of what is there, and he's starting with, well, there is absolutely everything. But for us to be able to understand what this everything is, he's going to have to describe it in particular ways, right? So there's a number of like very striking ways in which Spinoza is going to start talking about what his conception of God is, right? So the first one is, and this is a bit of a technical philosophical term, God is immanent, right? God is present in all, or maybe present is a bit of a Heideggerian word, but God is immanent in all things. God is absolutely everywhere. Everything that is a part of this one substance that he's talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's two references there. So when I was an adolescent, despite my terrible misadventure with the scripture teacher, which my mother was shocked to hear about.
Oh, yes.
And she said, why is it I'm hearing about things about you as a teenager that I never knew when you were a teenager?
Yeah.
It
all comes out.
Yeah. She thought, I feel really sorry for the scripture teacher. Being a teacher, I actually feel really guilty about that. I feel terrible for the scripture teacher.
It is one of those experiences, once you become a teacher, you think back to yourself as a student, you go, God, man,
I was a complete
god-awful student. I'm like, I never once went to office hours. I never once asked for help. And I was just, I probably talked too much without having done the reading. I was just one of those people.
Yeah, my mother said, well, she shouldn't have thrown you out of the class. She should have just given you an answer.
Yeah.
To the problem of evil. So anyway, 2 references. Like when I was an adolescent, thrown out of the scripture class, but absolutely fascinated by Jesus. Yeah. And so I read Nikos Kazantzakis' novel, The Last Temptation of Christ.
Yes.
The one that lies behind the great Scorsese film.
Yes.
And there's a line in which I remember Willem Dafoe playing Jesus saying, I look into the shiny black eye of an ant and I see the face of God.
Oh.
And I found that absolutely sublime as a statement of faith. And then, of course, Aldous Huxley in The Perennial Philosophy, which is a book that my dad gave me, talks about what it means to think an immanent God.
Yes.
And locates that thinking of immanence, because, of course, you've got the transcendent God in the Christian tradition. But mystics like Meister Eckhart would see God in a rose, for example, and would talk about God being within every single tiny thing.
Yeah. So again, subtending this idea of an immanent God, obviously it has theological kind of stakes, right? Spinoza is immediately rejecting the idea of a transcendent God up there in heaven, being an author of everything that exists down here on earth. Exactly as you say, God is present in the eye of the ant, or in a rose. God is immanent in all things. And of course, the other big kind of philosophical move here is that he is not starting out from a subjective position. He's not starting out from the position of I as subject. Yeah. Right? He's starting out with everything that is out there is depersonalized.
God is not a subject either.
Exactly. God is not a subject.
Yeah. So it's not like, so when I refer to, Dafoe as Jesus saying, I see the face of God in the shiny black eye of an ant. This is not to say that like baby Jesus is inside every single ant or living being, because it's not a personal God. That's a whole thing. Like God is present as these infinite causal networks.
Yes.
And so that's what's really difficult to get your head around, because there is a way in which you immediately generate a kind of hippie, mystical Spinoza.
Yeah, he leaves himself open to that so easily.
Yeah, and so we've got to be careful.
Yeah.
I just wanted to lay out the overall framework briefly for our readers so they don't get lost in the ethics.
Yes.
Just to reassure them. So part 1, we're starting out with this really abstract conception of maximum being. He's laying out his theory of existence of the entire universe. That's what we call an ontology. But from there, things get more and more concrete. So basically, it gets more and more reassuring.
Yeah.
In part 2, we actually start to meet minds and bodies.
Yes. Yeah.
And specifically the human body and the human minds, right? He also talks about the mind of God. And then he goes through all of our habit-forming mechanisms, the imagination, how prejudices are formed, why we fall into error so many times.
Yes.
And finally, he holds out like a beacon of hope at the end of part 2 about the possibility of adequate and true knowledge.
Yes. Yeah.
Then part 3, my favorite part.
Theory of the emotions.
That's right, the passions.
Yeah, it gives you a very detailed, like pedantic to such an incredible degree of all the ways, all the causes of all of your emotions, right? He gives you a kind of taxonomy. He goes, if you feel joy, if you feel sadness, if you feel pride, and it goes through and he shows, pride is a combination of this and that. And so, it gives you this kind of really beautiful, theory of the emotions and how you can understand the causes that led you to feeling these things. Right?
Exactly, and how other people's passions and objects enter into the constitution of your own passions.
Yeah, absolutely. He's very collective. He's a very collectivist kind of thinker, Spinoza. There's no individuals.
Exactly. It's all about socializing, what it means to be socialized, how to learn to get on with people in a group, how a group is formed by the
with
passions.
others. Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. You can start drawing diagrams of your entourage and of your close friends and family using part 1.
It's a good diagnostic tool.
Yeah. And then part 4 is actually, why is it that we're enslaved to the passions?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Why are we, even though, it's the whole problem of what Aristotle calls acrasia or incontinence. Why is it that I do the wrong thing even though I know what the right thing is, right? And so part 4 is about being subordinate to the passions as our masters.
Yes.
And then finally, I like to think of book 5 is we go back up the Big Dipper, we go back up the other side to the absolute again.
Yeah.
And this is the story of emancipation from the passions, the story of liberation. And it's basically, how can we gain true knowledge of the absolute?
Yeah. What is free? We're on the half pipe of being and we've gone back up. And
that's right.
Yeah. And it's exactly like that is the last, the very famous, a lot of ink has been spilled over part 5 of the ethics, because it is how do we know the absolute? What is the relationship between thought and the absolute? And a question that always fascinates my students is, what is freedom? What is free? Because as we'll see when we start going through part 1, Spinoza has this very rigid what seems like this rigid deterministic universe in which everything, it seems like everything's predetermined, etc.
There's a causal explanation for all phenomena.
For absolutely every single thing that happens, and it seems like there's no room for our individual will or freedom. But as I always reassure them, it's a process. And I think it's really important when we are talking about Spinoza is exactly this passage between part 1 and part 5. Each of the books, it starts from, I think it's Macharet who makes this kind of structural point about the ethics. It starts from the abstract and moves towards the concrete. Yeah.
Because the point of emancipation and liberation is precisely gaining the capacity to know the absolute in the singular thing.
Yes. And to know how you were acted, like freedom lies within knowing how you were acted upon by the outside world, right?
Yeah, it's knowing your place in the universe.
Exactly.
And it's accepting it as a kind of dynamic place.
Yes. So that's a kind of, overall architecture of the ethics as such. Okay, so we've got
immanence.
So we've got immanence, and we also, I feel like, to help our listeners along, we should be providing some references. So in Proposition 18 of Book 1, when Spinoza is talking about immanence, he says that God is the immanent, not the transitive cause of all things. So going back to that distinction between immanence and transcendence, in Proposition 18 he says, God is immanent. God is the immanent cause of everything in existence, right?
Yeah, and like all of these things, like the opposition between immanent cause and transitive cause, all of these basic concepts, these oppositions give us fruit, give us ground for a whole inquiry, right? So basically, you can take any of these oppositions and just workshop them And you're not just like diving down into the grass and going down a rabbit hole by doing that, because what it gives you is a whole way of thinking the universe, of thinking what it means to exist. So like for example, one way of thinking about transitive cause is that Descartes' author God is separate from his creation.
Yes.
And therefore he's a transitive cause, because he creates things and then things exist after that act of creation.
Yes.
According to the way in which God made them.
Yes.
At the origin. So there's a chronological separation as well as like a kind of existential separation.
Yes.
Whereas Spinoza's God, there's no separation of kind between the cause and the effects. So all individual things are effects of the ongoing causal activity of God.
Yes.
And they're within God, right? And basically one way of thinking this is that God is the unfolding of what we call the laws of nature. Yes. Right? God is gravity, for example.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's like, and this is the second striking property, or one of the other striking properties that Spinoza gives to God. God is self-causing, right? So Spinoza is working within a system of causes and effects. The ultimate, it's not like, I have to be really careful with my language here, because it's, as he says at the very beginning of the Ethics, God is, or substance is self-causing.
Yeah.
Right? It's not that there is an ultimate essence out there somewhere that you can finally arrive at in this ultimate causal chain. There's almost like this very strange, God is a self-causing substance, right? And so it's a causal system that continues out infinitely, right? And with an infinity of with that many causes, there's also an infinite number of effects, right?
Yeah. I mean, there are a number of ways of thinking about this. One is that he's basically just taking Descartes' conception of God, where Descartes basically says, if something is infinite and perfect, then obviously one of the perfections is existence.
Yes.
If it's infinitely perfect, therefore it must exist.
It must, yes.
So God's essence is to be completely and absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
Therefore, he must exist.
Yeah.
Right? So he's borrowing that conception.
Yes.
Right? And at the same time, what he's doing is he's saying any substance whatsoever has to be like this. And here he borrows something from Aristotle and the whole tradition and just exacerbates it.
Yeah.
Which is that substance was always supposed to be independent.
Yeah.
It's always supposed to be autonomous. Right? And to be truly autonomous, to be truly independent, you cannot be caused by something external.
Exactly.
Right?
God cannot have a creator, right?
Yeah. You have to do a kind of Baron Munchausen act. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and pop yourself into existence.
Yeah. And it's also interesting, like where Spinoza says self-cause, and not God is the cause of everything, is again to go against this idea of authorship, right? It's not that God is cause of, like, as in God is a creator of everything. It's a self-cause.
Exactly.
Right? So again, he's going against this idea of God being a transitive, transcendental thing. And this is how he's kind of building his system off this position of immanence. From immanence, it has to follow that there is self-cause, because if it was just a cause, that would mean that God would either also have to have a creator, and if God was cause, that also has a theological kind of, reading that God is the creator God in a lot of kind of Christian traditions. So these are the kind of theological and ontological stakes of his positions that he's setting up, right, in this construction.
And another way to understand this self-causing substance is to simply think of the kind of question that somebody who wants to make a physics teacher cry would ask, which is, okay, fine, I'm going to give you the Big Bang, but what caused the Big Bang?
Classic,
right? Yes. And you have to, like, in a certain point, the physics teacher has to say, well, the Big Bang causes itself.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, so,
and that's Spinoza's self-causing substance.
It's very impressive that Spinoza, because that's always the example I use, it is Spinoza anticipates the Big Bang in this kind of self-causing idea of the universe, right?
Absolutely.
So
we're immediately installed in the infinite. We know that it's immanent, that we're all inside it, that it's causing us all the time. We know that it's self-causing. It's got this affirmative outpouring of existence all the time.
Yeah.
And then we also know that it's infinite, not just in a mere quantitative sense, but that its essence can be known in infinite ways.
Oh, yeah. So
now, this is kind of mysterious because this is when he starts to talk about attributes.
Yes, this is where it gets...
Val,
it's
help
really,
me out.
You're asking the wrong person.
What is an attribute?
All I know going through this book is that I know that there's an infinity of attributes. So an attribute can be any... An attribute's kind of just like, it's like the word. It's like, it's what is the quality? Like, what is this kind of, like, you know, what is an attribute of this, you know, whatever, table, hardness, whatever, the
flatness,
flatness. It's attributes. It's just the qualities.
Attributes are easy in like Aristotle and Descartes.
Yeah.
You know, they're just basically the properties of things.
Yes.
Right?
But, I mean, Spinoza just has to make it difficult by saying, well, it's just, there's an infinity of these different attributes, right?
Yeah.
And he doesn't even leave it there.
Well, it's worse. He says because we're so limited as human beings, we only know two of them. You're like, what? There's an infinite. There are so many. How can you say there are so many if we only know two?
But we'll get to what that is. That's at the beginning of part 2, right? You know. But anyway,
I want to read this definition. Definition 4, right? First, we're still on the first page, Val.
Oh my God! Yeah.
By attributes, I mean that which an intellect perceives of a substance as constituting its essence.
Clear as day.
So basically, an attribute is whatever, it's the way in which you think a substance, right? And here, he's going to go very, very large, very general when it comes to the two attributes that he names.
Yes.
He's going to say one attribute is thinking.
Yep.
And another attribute is extension.
Yeah, and so we should be familiar with both of these attributes because that's what Descartes was banging on about with his mind-body dualism, right? We have
absolutely.
Thought and we have extension, right? We have
Yeah.
But, you know, of course, Spinoza is famous for being a monist instead of a dualist, right?
Right, but Val, let's just say that you're Matthew McConaughey going through the black hole in Interstellar.
All right.
There you go. So you're surrounded with this like pouring of light and matter, like being sucked down through into the black hole.
Yeah.
Right. And apparently they actually did consult, like Nolan actually consulted with a contemporary physicist to say, what would the edge of a black hole actually look like?
Yes, yeah.
And the images they came up with were completely informed by the reasoning of that particular scientist.
Yeah, okay.
So it's not arbitrary, not completely arbitrary. So you are Matthew McConaughey, right? And, you know, people can say, how can you think the absolute? How can you think everything that is? And Spinoza's got a really simple answer. He says, well, look, you know that we think things either as physically extended, like all that matter pouring through the black hole, or you think of it through Matthew McConaughey's character, I forget the name, actually having the experience and thinking it and saying, what the fuck, you know, what's going on? Yeah.
The incomprehensibility of your own experience in face of this infinite, this thing that's passing by you kind of at infinite speeds, right?
Well, it's not just to the infinite, it's Anne Hathaway passing by.
Oh, yes, and even that, Maybe I saw the infinite in Anne Hathaway's eyes.
So you think substance, right? He claims it can be thought in all kinds of different ways. Each way that we're thinking it, we think substance as mind, or we think it as extension. That's a way of thinking its essence.
Yes.
That's a way. And what is essence? Essence is the kind of thing that something is.
Yes.
Right? I mean, this is another classical, like, philosophical terminology. This is not just Spinoza.
No.
Many philosophers through the tradition talk about essence versus existence.
Yeah.
So essence is what a thing is, and existence is that it is.
Yeah. And how it is existing in the world. Right?
As a kind of as a verb. Right?
So I felt I struggled quite a bit this semester with all of my terrible examples to explain these distinctions. But like we can just use the example of a table or a chair, right? We can kind of say it is the essence of a table to have this particular form, shape, but then its existence is there are many different kinds. Right, there's many different kinds of tables that come in different shapes and sizes, but more or less we have an idea of what the essence of a table is. At least something that we can put our stuff on in some respect,
Exactly.
Again,
and when you Spinoza says when you talk about the existence of a thing, then there enters the question of how long does it exist for, its duration. And how many of those things exist, and what external causes bring it about that a table exists.
Yeah. And so, so we've got an infinity of attributes. Right. Because, and I mean, that kind of stands to read. When you start trying to think about what the attributes of something is, it can continue on. It can continue on in this sort of infinite way, right? That is the way in which thinking works. We keep trying to attribute different attributes and to different things, right? So he's saying there's an infinity of attributes, but then he doesn't just leave it there.
No. More terminology.
Located in an infinite number of modes.
Exactly.
What's
now,
a mode?
What is a mode?
Tell me what, please.
Let's go for another definition.
Here we go.
By mode, I mean affections of a substance, or that which is in another thing, through which it is also conceived.
Okay.
Right. So two parts to that definition. Yeah. First one, a mode is an affection of substance.
Yeah.
So basically, it's a kind of a modification. I like to think of it as a little fold, a little twist, a little tuck in the fabric of being.
Yeah, exactly. Right? It's something that it's something that changes in extension, right? But right. It's a modification. Yeah.
Yeah. And it gets different philosophers talk about this term in different ways. And Descartes certainly talks about modes and modal distinction, but they're kind of like minor properties or whatever of a body in Descartes. Whereas here, Spinoza is eventually going to say any particular thing, any particular human being, any particular animal or building or whatever, they're all modes, right? And how are they in something? Well, you can only think of a human being within the category of animals, within the category of hopefully rational animals, within the category of a family, of a society, having a certain age. And so you always think a human being within a context, right?
We're all expressing humanness in the various different ways, right?
Right.
I mean, again, I'm going to continue with my terrible examples, but, if we wanted to take the example of water, water has different modes, right? When it gets colder, it turns into ice. When it heats up, it turns into steam, right? These are different modes of water, right? And water itself is a mode of blah, blah, but it keeps going backwards causally, but that's just another way of thinking about it, right?
Right. So we've got this basic terminology. We have substance at the top level.
Yep.
Substance expresses itself in these infinite attributes. And then within each of these attributes, there are infinite modes.
Yeah.
Right? So we have, for example, the attribute thinking.
Yeah.
And within the attribute thinking, there are just, billions of human minds having various thoughts.
All thinking different things all at the same time.
Sounds like a mess.
It is a mess. I'm not sure if you've looked out into existence recently, but it is a little bit of a mess. And trying to chart a course through it all, it takes a little bit of time and a little bit of discipline, right?
So fourth characteristic of this infinite that we've suddenly found ourselves in at the beginning of book one is that, much to our surprise, Spinoza famously says, it can be called God or nature. It makes no difference.
Yeah.
This is the famous Deus sive natura.
Yes.
It's one of the great slogans of Spinoza.
But a very, again, philosophically curious choice because, arbitrarily, it seems like an arbitrary difference in the name, but then why give it two names? Why could you say it's God or nature? And actually, if I wanted to complicate it even further, being a little bit tricky, adding in the third term, why isn't it just called substance?
Well, I don't think substance speaks to anybody maybe there's a kind of rhetorical ploy here. I mean, he is making this massive intervention into the tradition and fusing two categories that previously have been separate.
Been completely separated. God as the creator of nature, as the creator of existence, and suddenly Spinoza has fused the two. And, if we think back to the bit of the biography that we did of Spinoza a couple of episodes ago, he was taking some risks with this one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is like, many people read, and a lot of commentators that I follow read Spinoza as an atheist.
Yeah.
He did not advertise that himself at all. So he wants to retain the name God. And in fact, part one is called Of God.
Exactly.
It's not called Of Nature. It's not called Of Substance. It's Of God.
Yes.
So, the question for me is okay, we know you're going to argue there's just one substance. And that kind of fits our monotheistic view that there's just one God.
Yeah.
Right? But how can you still call this maximal substance, this absolute God, when most of the theological attributes of God are completely missing? I mean, this is not a good God.
Yeah.
This doesn't, at the moment, appear to be an omniscient God, though that's going to change later on.
Yeah.
It doesn't appear to be omnipotent in the way that an author God is,
No.
though that is going to change later on.
Mm.
We do get eternity coming in later on,
Yep.
but this God does not answer prayers, right?
No.
This God doesn't judge human beings at the last judgment and
Yeah.
cast them down into hell or invite them up through the pearly gates.
Yeah, there's no good or evil in this for this God, right? There's no domination. There's like no human relation that we have to this God in the kind of classical way that we think about it, right?
Exactly, and I think that's why there's a certain moment, if you've had any kind of like religious education or any exposure to religion whatsoever, or if you are a believer, there's a moment where you feel a bit let down in reading the ethics, because you just think, well, what is there for me to love? Yeah. What is there for me to trust? What is there to support me going forwards during my life, which is full of various ordeals, depending where you've been born, of course, if there's not a personal God? And this brings us, Val, to the second part of this episode. Yes. Depersonalizing God.
It is depersonalizing. Yeah, because I want to know what will be my eternal reward for being a good person in this life, That's what I want to know. And Spinoza has taken it away from me.
Well, I want to kind of cut to the chase and say your reward is here and now. Your reward is like with the people, basically
in this life.
In this life, cooperating with the people you love. Yeah, that's the reward. It's its own reward. Virtue is its own reward.
Virtue, very, very Aristotelian of him. Virtue is a good unto itself.
Yeah. So here, part 2 of this episode: how do you depersonalize God? Yeah. Well, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to strip God of all intentionality.
Exactly.
God does not have a purpose. God is not realizing a plan.
Yeah, God does not have a plan for you,
For anybody.
Yeah, God doesn't have a will. God doesn't judge what is good or what is evil. God doesn't intervene, cause floods, etc., etc., So again, like it's being very... I can understand why people were accusing him of being a heretic and an atheist, because he's basically just like... has he read the Old Testament? God's constantly intervening. He's making wagers with the devil, stripping Job of all of his, earthly possessions to see if Job will still retain his faith, and it's like, what's Spinoza doing here? He's just...
Well, to be fair, in another book, a great book that he wrote called the Theologico-Political Treatise, he develops a long critique of the very idea of miracles. Yes. And he says, basically, if you look very closely and dig underneath the metaphorical language, each time there is actually a scientific explanation available for that herd of swine running off a cliff. Yes. Right? It wasn't possession by demons. A bunch of, a swarm of bees went after them or something, right? So he's got a critique of miracles in another text. Basically, he's going to say that what God is the necessary unfolding of law-like phenomena.
Yes, of the determinate laws of nature, right? God is immanent in what the laws of nature are, what these relationships of cause and effect are. And so as such, it can't be an anthropological, anthropomorphized kind of man up there in heaven with a beard.
No, absolutely. It's just the way things work. Yeah. To make it very, very simple. Yeah. And it's not as though God took a moment and was free to choose different laws of the universe and thought, I think I'll have these 3 rather than those 4, right? Because that introduces arbitrariness and the image of God as some kind of monarch, into it.
Who just picked and chose willy-nilly, how this is how I was feeling on this time of day, the laws of the universe. Spinoza's going to say, no. Again, this is a conception of God, that does things arbitrarily. What Spinoza's going to be saying is, no, God is the necessary laws of the universe. God is what is. To put it in another really simple way.
And we get to this bit. I mean, if some of our readers are actually like flicking through part 1, this is basically propositions 26 through 29, where he talks about necessity, the modality of necessity, as the nature of the universe as it unfolds in causal form.
Yeah, and I kind of like this, like, because there's so many accusations against Spinoza of, being an atheist and a heretic, and it's kind of interesting when you see him push back, and he says, you were the ones being heretics by saying that God has free will and arbitrarily decides stuff, right? Like you were the ones who were saying that, God is lacking some kind of, perfection or whatever. He's like, if you subscribe to the idea of this, interventionist God, then God can make decisions arbitrarily. My God, for Spinoza said, my God doesn't do that. My God operates according to the necessary laws of this universe. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky kind of game to play, and all of these theologians and the scholastics played it, which is whose God is better, mine or yours?
Exactly, yeah.
And Spinoza's got a winning card here because he's basically saying, as soon as you humanize God, you're rendering God imperfect, right? Because humans are imperfect, right?
Yeah, and that was one of the things. This is one of the things that Spinoza's responding to that I found very unsatisfying with Descartes, because for one, if I'm going to be a little bit mean to Descartes, I'll say that his conception of God is that God is good, and that's one of the grounds under which that I am not deceived. That's the kind of guarantee. God is good, God wouldn't deceive me, etc., etc. But when you say God is good, that comes into contradiction with the idea that God is perfect, because if God is necessarily good, that means God cannot be evil, or God cannot be bad, but that means that God lacks something. God is no longer perfect. God does not have something in existence, right?
Well, that's another thing that Spinoza does. He strips out all of the moral terminology when referring to God.
Yeah.
So this is no longer a God as a judge. God is no longer evaluating our actions.
No.
He's no longer handing out praise or blame. Yeah. He's not making sure that a divine system of cosmic punishment is at work, like Dante's, Inferno with the 9 rings of hell. There's no reward, there's no benevolence, there's no malevolence either.
Yeah.
Right? So all that we have is well, what do we have? This is the question. What do we have? What's left once you've depersonalized God? We've basically got just these really abstract definitions at the beginning.
Yes, we're still in these very abstract definitions, and this is where dear listeners, you have to stick with us, because it's going to get progressively less abstract, right?
Exactly. And this is where I just want to shout out to Katja Diefenbach, who's somebody who works in Berlin and who I worked with at the Jan van Eyck Academy in Maastricht like 20 years back. And she gave a fantastic talk at this Erasmus-funded BIP. Now, a BIP is a blended intensive program.
Oh, okay.
Right? Yeah. And that basically means it's blended in that you get students, master's students and undergraduates from all over Europe, and you say, hey, come here, and we're going to do an intensive workshop on Spinoza. And it's basically focused on the students' learning, and you invite experts to talk about different aspects of Spinoza, right?
Fantastic.
And so Philip Delacese, a mate of mine from the Cive Natura International Center of Spinozan Studies, along with Pascal Séverac of Paris 10, Nanterre, the Department of Philosophy. Those two organized this fantastic workshop. And Katja gave this amazing talk on Gilles Deleuze and Tony Negri's readings of the beginning of the ethics. And one point that she basically made is what we're given at the very beginning are just a series of empty definitions. She's not saying there's only Spinoza doesn't say straight away, there's only one substance, it's called God, or it's nature, infinite attributes. He basically says substance has to be self-causing.
Yes.
Right? He says that substance has to be something that is in itself. You don't think it through something else. Right? And he says that it's conceived or known on its basis, not via another thing.
Yeah.
Right? And that's definition 3. And then in definition 6, he says substance qua God consists of infinite attributes.
Yeah.
So we've got 3 different ways of thinking about substance, right? Self-causing, it's in itself, right? And it's got infinite attributes.
Yeah.
And what he's going to do in the initial 9 or so propositions is he's just going to slowly unpack the consequences of those definitions.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's so beautiful about the text once you kind of get past this initial very disorienting, like, because I think I've said this before, but this is one of the, still to this day, I've never read a philosophy book like this. It's very, very bizarre in its beginnings, and a lot of kind of philosophers have made a big deal about this. But baked into the very structure of the ethics is this relationality, right? You get these definitions, you get these axioms, but then when he starts writing out his propositions, you see the way in which these different elements relate to one another and how they build upon one another. And, and again, he says it in the title of the book, it's ethics proved in a geometric order. So you have to follow this building. It's a construction. It's like, it's a absolutely masterful construction, but with relationality built into every single moment of it, right? So yeah, the definitions by themselves don't do very much, but then once you start putting them together and combining them with the axioms in different propositions, etc., there's this really kind of incredible way in which they relate to one another.
Yeah, there's each of these definitions will be referred to later on.
Yeah.
In the demonstrations of the propositions.
Exactly, right?
Yeah. And there are these people at Boston University, I think it is, who engaged in this astonishing project in which they actually diagrammed the logical relationships between the propositions in the 5 parts of the ethics.
Yeah.
So you can click on each part of the ethics is like a cloud of dots, right? And each dot is a proposition, and you click on one of the propositions, and then it unfolds all of these purple lines going back to all the different other definitions that proposition presupposes.
No way. That would have been so useful to have. I mean, it still is very useful.
Yeah. But basically, so they diagram the argumentative logic of the ethics.
Yeah, to see if it actually holds together. Because I know, I think maybe we've already talked about this on the podcast before, but Alain Badiou's doctoral dissertation was exactly on Spinoza's ethics, and I think it was either just book or part 1, or maybe part 1 and part 2. And from what I understand, it was him trying to say, does this actually follow the Euclidean order of geometric demonstration? So he was trying to see exactly what is does it actually logically relate in the way that Spinoza claims that it does, right?
Sure. Yeah. And so, of course, another question, for our listeners is, when you read one of these great philosophies, one reaction that we always have is that of feeling overwhelmed and thinking, am I just going to become a disciple of Spinoza and become dogmatic about Spinoza? And you can always gain some kind of freedom, some kind of distance in your relationship to a new philosopher by simply asking questions about, and with Spinoza gives you all kinds of opportunities to ask questions, because each of the steps in his demonstrations potentially doesn't work.
Oh, yeah.
So, for example, now I've got a problem with definition 6 because he sneaks God in, right?
It does, yeah.
He says God is one, right?
Yeah.
And I reckon you need a demonstration there, but he sneaks it straight into a definition. So I think he's got a little bit sneaky there.
Oh, yeah, nice. He's definitely, there's and I think this is one of the other experiences that people have, and and I suppose this is a common accusation against philosophy. It's like, these are just arbitrary choices. Like, he's presupposed that this definition is in and of itself true. And I've had this experience with students quite a bit, and they go, "This is just arbitrary choices," and I go, in a certain sense, yes, it appears initially as arbitrary, but it ceases to be arbitrary when you start looking at how they're deployed in the argument. That's exactly what you're looking at.
Yeah.
You need to...
Because it works as part of a whole.
Yeah, it works as part... If it doesn't work, show me. Show me where he made a mistake in the argument,
And they're not arbitrary in that they're all grounded in the tradition.
Exactly. They're not arbitrary whatsoever, but it's their place within the broader argument that you have to critique them, because, as much as everyone hates to admit it, we all presuppose stuff all of the time, there's a bit of arbitrariness built into everything that we do, you know? Like,
yeah. Well, he's trying to unpack those presuppositions, and he basically, I mean, I think the first definitions and axioms of part 1 are his list of the absolutely primordial suppositions that you need to think anything whatsoever.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right? Yeah, this lies at the basis of any thinking.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. And yeah, this is often the challenge that I say to, you know, anyone really. I go, okay, start trying to tell me about everything in existence. How are you going to go about doing that? Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, this is Spinoza trying to do that, you know.
Yeah.
You try and do it. And, you know,
I think you have to admit, Val, that one way to think totality is you have to say that totality is not existing inside something else.
Yeah.
Because if it is the totality, it has to be in itself, right?
It has to be in itself. Otherwise, it's contained by something else, which is bigger.
And then you don't have the totality.
Then that's just
right. So now we've come to part 3 of episode 16 of today's episodes, and this is simply the question: what is this absolute? Right? We know how he's unfolding it. We've seen some of the initial characteristics of it, and I just want to throw an interpretation out there right now, and that is, I think that what it means to be in Spinoza's absolute, what it means to think Spinoza's absolute, is to think your enfolded participation without any boundaries in an expanding we or us.
Oh, okay.
It's all about cooperation, man.
Yeah.
I'm going Sesame Street on this one.
Yeah, I feel like this is where Spinoza leaves himself open to, you know, very hippie interpretation. But no, like
the hippies don't have a monopoly on saying we.
No, they stole it. They stole it. But there is absolute. I totally agree with this. There's something. The other really disorienting thing, you know, particularly following on from Descartes, gives us a theory of the subject. Spinoza doesn't give us a theory of an individual, right? He's looking at relationality, and as such, you know, and this is one of the things that, you know, philosophers have, you know, criticized him for, you know, most notably certain German philosopher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, in my terrible German accent. Spinoza gets accused of not having a theory of a subject, but we can think about, in terms of what Oliver just said, there's a sense in which we are all always already relational to everyone else. It's a collective subject. There is no I. There's no I, me, mine. You're always embedded in a network of relations, if you want to put it in that kind of language as well, you know. And what Spinoza is trying to do is to think this infinitely large network of relations.
Yeah, and the problem with this network is, as I said before, it's without boundaries.
Exactly, it continues infinitely.
Yeah.
You know?
And one of the things, so thinking cooperation without boundaries is and experimenting with it is quite difficult.
Yes.
One of the ways in which he names this absence of boundaries is the indivisibility of absolute substance.
Oh, yes.
And this is basically propositions 12 through 15.
Yeah.
And of course, we've already seen with Descartes that we can hold that our minds are indivisible in that they do not have distinct parts.
No.
We might have different capacities. We can imagine. We can remember.
Yeah.
Right. We can calculate. We can judge. We can wish, etc. So we can do different things with our minds. So maybe we can speak about faculties of the mind.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have distinct parts. Right.
Yeah.
The mind. So I think most of us will grant that the mind is indivisible. Yeah. But when it comes to extension, when it comes to bodies, most of us want to be able to operate a saw, right?
Exactly,
and divide two things.
Exactly.
Right? You know, I've got my wheat bix, and I'm going to chop it in half, right?
I'm still, I don't know why I'm still so adamant on this division, but I'm Vitabrits. I think wheat bix, devil's work. Vitabrits for me is anyway. But this But exactly, to be able to divide something in half, right? But there's a particular problem you're going to run into. What happens when you divide infinity? You want to try and cut my infinite substance in half. What are you left with then?
You just keep cutting.
You just keep cutting it?
So this is actually, one of the famous problems in the whole history of metaphysics is the relationship between the continuum and the discrete. Right?
Yeah.
And you hit this in Aristotle precisely through the question of dividing a distance infinite times.
Yeah.
Do you still get little bits, or can they be infinitely divided? Like, are there actually discrete building blocks of the universe? Is the universe basically made up of Lego, right?
Yeah.
Or does it all just become flow all the way down?
Just a Heraclitean flux.
That's the continuous side, right?
Yeah.
And so, of course, the Christian theologians have already said that the specific thing about Christianity, and priests that I know 2 priests quite well, they always insist on this point. They say, look, Christianity is very specific because it says God incarnates himself in one particular human body, which just happens to be that of Jesus of Nazareth.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And this is, no other monotheistic religion does this.
No.
So Christianity does say God can become body.
Yeah.
Right? But Spinoza one-ups them. He basically says God is all bodies.
Yeah, exactly.
God is all extension.
Yeah.
He's the space between bodies as well.
Yeah.
Right? And so what we need to think, Val, and I think this is a real challenge, is you get very happy with a knife and fork chopping up your lunch, right? But it's indivisible, Val. How do you think that? How is your lunch indivisible?
How is my lunch indivisible?
Even when you use chopsticks, I tell you, it's indivisible.
Even despite all my best efforts. But I mean, the thing that Spinoza is going to respond to. Oh, okay. How am I going to think this?
You've got a clump of sticky rice between your chopsticks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, these are just modes. These are just expressions of God. But substance, I think the way that Spinoza does this really quite eloquently is he says, okay, I'm talking about substance as a whole, as this infinite, this infinity of infinite things, right? You can't divide substance in two, because what do you do? Like, what happens when you just divide something in two? You either get two finite parts, or you get two things that are infinitely large. And of course, you fall into a contradiction for Spinoza. Unfortunately, he's writing a bit before the advent of set theory. He says it is incoherent to have two infinitely large substances, right? Because that means they are no longer infinite, right? And infinity can't just be the sum of two finite parts, right? So when he's talking at the level of substance, he's saying, you can't divide an infinitely large thing, because the moment you do that, it is no longer infinite. And therefore, it is no longer perfect, and it is therefore no longer God.
Dear listeners, Val has just unknowingly reenacted the great scene from Apocalypse Now, where Dennis Hopper explains dialectics and says you can't get to infinity via fractions, man.
Yeah, you can't, man. I should have got my bandana on.
So Spinoza kind of sums this up in the Scholium to Proposition 15.
Yeah.
He says, matter is everywhere the same, and parts are not distinguished in it, except insofar as we conceive matter as affected in various ways. Right?
Yes.
So this is the key. What this basically means is that material bodies are not demarcated, right, or delimited in your lingo, right, by apparent surfaces or figures or shapes, right? Yeah. It's rather changes in those bodies,
modifications,
as they participate in interactions with other bodies, that actually allow us to distinguish them, right?
Exactly. So I'm still allowed to cut up my lunch, and I'm not doing any great violence to the infinity of substance, right? I'm allowed to cut up extension, divide it, because these are modifications or transformations that all partake in this infinite thing.
Yeah, well, those grains of rice, I mean, you're pretty quick when you eat. I've seen you, like with those chopsticks and those clumps of sticky rice. Yeah. But each individual grain of sticky rice is drying out slowly, right? It's absorbed a fair bit of water through the steaming process, right? And it's on its way to a terrible fate inside your digestion system, right? So it's undergoing these continual changes, right? It looks like it's static. It's not.
It's not.
You know, Spinoza is a thinker of a dynamic universe.
Oh, absolutely. You know, against all the charges that Hegel lays against him of being, you know, static, immobile, which I would think is very, very unfair. It's a completely dynamic system. And I think, a French philosopher who I've referred to quite a lot because I really appreciate his reading of Spinoza in his book or part by part breakdown of the ethics, he drew my attention to a very very obvious point in the very first definition of Spinoza's whole system against Hegel's charge of, you know, Spinoza having a static, immobile system. Macharet just goes, the first definition is a causal one. It's causality. It is movement. Like you cannot accuse Spinoza. I mean, there are obviously other parts of this debate, but a very simple one is Spinoza is dealing with a causal system where everything is in this dynamic relationality that is constantly moving, transforming, changing, etc., etc.
Yeah.
You know?
So we've got indivisibility.
Yeah.
Right. And then this is the last, you know, character of Spinoza's absolute substance that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
We've got this indistinguishability. Right? In other words, you can't distinguish another substance.
Yes.
Right? So for me, in a funny way, this fact that there's only one unique substance also means that apart from speaking of it in these abstract philosophical terms, you can't throw a boundary around the substance. Like in a certain sense, because it's this infinite unfolding, it's also incomplete.
Yes.
Right.
Well, this is a claim that I have often made and have gotten into a lot of trouble with Melbourne's finest Spinozists, Janice Richardson and John Rubin. I've made exactly this point before, that there's a sense in which because it is limitless, there's also a sense in which it is incomplete. And we had many, many long nights at the Clyde Hotel in Melbourne and Carlton arguing over this exact kind of point.
But there's another denizen of the Clyde Hotel that we need to reassure here.
Yes.
And that is Adam Bartlett.
That is Adam Bartlett.
Bless his heart.
Ah, yes.
We'd just like to thank him for his love letter to Luna.
Yes, and I would also...
recent episode of the Barren Field Experience.
Yes, on ideology. And I would just like to say in as a little response, I cannot recommend their podcast highly enough. Some of my great, I'll make them uncomfortable and call them my masters, but also my very good friends who are very instrumental in my own intellectual formation. You know, Justin Clemens, Adam Bartlett, Brian Cook, you know, and the fact that they have this wonderful podcast together where they go in every single direction and draw some kind of sense out of the spontaneous use of thought. I really...
Yeah, I mean, Justin sums it all up and synthesizes it and comes up with like one 3-line sentence in which he names the current ideological condition.
Amazing work. Cannot help but recommend them highly enough.
So let's reassure Adam.
Yes.
This oneness at the same time is this infinite, unfolding. And I think that for all of Badiou's posturing and his way of trying to distinguish himself from Spinoza, which is just a way of him saying, don't read Tony Negri, read me, because I want to be the great philosopher of the left, right, and of communism. All of his like distinguishing his own work from Spinoza. At the same time, you can read inconsistent multiplicity very easily into the beginning of the ethics of part 1.
Yes, and exactly in this kind of, this moment of it being, of indistinguishability, and what appears as a monism and as a unique substance actually has a kind of incompleteness baked into it, because it's a causal system that continues out and extends out infinitely, right? That cannot be bounded, and in my own kind of, reading of, Badiou's big, moment in Immanence of Truths where he's talking about the absolute V universe.
Yeah.
The temptation is, of course, to call him a Platonist, and that's what he's trying to do in many respects. But, I think you can also read this V universe as the Spinozist one.
Well, I think, look, I just want to make this point quickly because we're going to get into this in the next episode. Like, how does he actually think there's just one substance?
Yeah.
You can read that maxim, deus sive natura, as suggesting sive something else, sive history, sive something else, and just continuing.
Yes.
God or nature or something else or something else, like a whole list of names.
Or
And that's one
everything,
way in which you can think the inconsistent multiplicity of Spinoza's absolute.
Yeah.
But I mean, just from an everyday, like, cursory knowledge of the history of philosophy, we know that Aristotle, like, every dog, every stick, every table, every person is a substance.
Yeah, an infinity of substances.
There are substances all over the place.
Same with Leibniz, right?
Yeah.
There's an infinity of monads,
Right. So you can say, like, why, if every single particular thing is a substance, what on earth was Spinoza thinking when he said everything is just one substance, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, I spent like 6 months of the first year of my PhD in absolute hell reading Aristotle's metaphysics and then diving into 2,000 years of commentaries on the metaphysics of people, very erudite, famous professors trying to make sense of the metaphysics. You think they give up after 2,000 years?
Apparently not. We still.
And the thing is like, first of all, if I went to the French commentators, Pierre Aubanc, who's brilliant, who writes The Problem of Being, that's this great book, he just basically says, it's unsolvable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He admits
why not just say that?
Yeah.
He says it's unsolvable. Yeah. Aristotle had massive problems in pinning down the unity and identity of substances.
Yes, you couldn't, there's a massive problem when you have this, like a massive philosophical problem when you have this infinity of different substances. It's like, what is their identity? But more importantly, and this is, I think, where Spinoza gets around this problem, what is their relationality? Like, how do they interact, right? Because we saw this with Descartes, right? When you have two substances, Descartes spent so much time trying to think about how do two different substances interact with one another.
That was Princess Elizabeth's point.
Exactly. Aristotle, well before the letter, has only gone and made that problem infinitely larger.
Yeah, I mean, Aristotle had a massive problem, which is how do the two different parts of a substance interact, form and matter.
Exactly.
He could never, because they're totally different. Like, form is discrete, it can be defined, matter is plastic and indefinable at first, and then form comes and gives shape to matter. Matter is indefinite, so how does the definite relate to the indefinite? He had all these problems, and he also says substance is whatever underlies both change and all properties. Right, so it's a kind of a matrix in which all properties inhere, right? And then if you say that oneness is a property, then your question is, well, that matrix itself, how is that one?
Yeah.
Right, if oneness is just a property, for example. And so even within the tradition, the unity and identity of substances was a massive problem, right? And so what Spinoza is going to do, and it's going to be a series of negative demonstrations, like demonstrations via the absurd in the first 8 or 9 propositions of part 1. He's going to show that every single time you try to distinguish multiple substances, it all falls apart. It doesn't work.
You run into these kind of ridiculous contradictions. Like one of them I already kind of outlined was, you can't have two substances of infinite sizes because that's just a contradiction. It doesn't. It's no longer infinite if there's two things that are infinitely expanding, right? So that's one of the ways he's going to do that. Spinoza in one fell swoop is in my view gotten around a lot of the problems that have been haunting philosophy for since at least Aristotle, if not before.
Yeah, and at the same time, there's a great affirmative political message which is super contemporary, absolutely important for our times, which is. He's basically saying all of your distinctions fall apart.
Yes.
All of your distinctions fall apart.
We need to think what is nature and our place in and our relationality to nature, not as something separate and distinct. Nature is not something made by God to be used by us. We are a part of nature, right?
We're in an indivisible totality, and we need to think that in an expansive sense.
Yes. I think that's a good spot.
Yeah. Expansive thinking.
There's a political valence to it, and I think it's a good spot to leave off.
So thanks everybody for being on board again and for bearing with us during the break.
Yes. We promise it won't happen again, maybe.
Till next time.
See you later.